Today on Ag Etc. Kansas State University veterinarian AJ Tarpoff is urging cattle producers to beef up their plans for managing heat stress in their herds, a challenge that costs the U.S. cattle industry up to $370 million in losses each year. Learn how heat stress decreases reproductive efficiency and performance of cattle grazing on pasture. Then I visit with this week's Young Leader in Ag, Payke Brown. Learn about Payke's leadership opportunities while in college and future aspirations in the agricultural field. Finally, the Kansas Department of Agriculture has now identified positive cases of vesicular stomatitis virus in 20 counties in Kansas. I visit with Assistant Animal Health Commissioner for the Kansas Department of Agriculture, Andy Hawkins, on signs you need to watch out for and what they're doing in response to this outbreak. It's all coming up on Ag Etc. Stay tuned.
These days, no one can afford to take the risk of being without financial protection against high health care costs, not even for a few days. Kansas Farm Bureau health plans offer short-term health care coverage to fill in those temporary gaps. Short-term health plans can provide you with medical coverage when you are between health plans, helping lower your potential financial risk. Learn more at kfbhealthplans.com or contact a Farm Bureau financial services agent near you.
This segment brought to you by Kansas Corn. Learn more at kscorn.com.
Welcome back to Ag AM in Kansas. I'm Britton Rucker. A Kansas State University veterinarian is urging cattle producers to beef up their plans for managing heat stress in their herds. And that veterinarian is with me now, AJ Tarpoff. Welcome, AJ.
Thanks for having me.
Now, AJ, cattle will often accumulate heat temperatures, but there are more factors behind that.
There really are. So I think I should start off with all animals, all cattle, all people, we're susceptible to heat. Okay. Now, cattle specifically, they're not very efficient at cooling themselves. Okay. Just inherently, they can only really cool themselves through evaporative cooling. And most of that actually comes through when they breathe. Okay. So we'll see cattle pant. We'll see some of these different factors. And that's when we know they're starting to accumulate heat. Now, cattle accumulate heat normally. Okay, that they can handle that readily. The issues become if they don't have enough nighttime cooling during the nighttime hours, and it generally happens in the middle of the night, and they need about 6 hours of cooling in order to cool themselves appropriately.
And it even comes down to different hide colors.
It does. So not all animals are affected the same way within a group, within a pen, within a yard, within a pasture setting. Certain animals are more susceptible to heat stress. And those animals would be those that are darker colored hides, okay, because they will accumulate more of the solar radiation. Animals that have previously had health insults, if they had pneumonia as a younger animal, if they had any of those issues they've recovered from, they can be more at risk, as well as some of our heavier body conditioned animals. The more fat cover they have, the more insulation they have, the more susceptible they are to accumulating a heat load.
And AJ, by having your cattle stress due to heat, there are some negative effects associated with that.
There's quite a bit of negative effects associated with heat stress. It's been estimated that the cattle industry loses about $370 million a year just due to the effects of heat stress. That has to do with the cattle, they're eating less. Okay, all they're trying to do is cool themselves. We actually have decreased reproductive rates. Okay, so we have decreased fertility during the heat, the peak heat periods of the year, but also some of the direct losses. Okay, some of those animals unfortunately can succumb to some of the stressors of heat. So all of this together, we have decreased performance, hinder on the animal. These are major factors that we battle with year in and year out.
Yeah, and a lot of us think, and you kind of touched on it, but we as humans cool off by sweating, and we might assume cattle do the same and as efficient as us, but that's not the case.
Believe it or not, contrary to popular belief, cattle do sweat. But to put into perspective, they only sweat about 10% of the capacity of what people do. Okay, so it's very inefficient means to be able to cool themselves. Their most efficient means to cool themselves is actually through breathing. And that's why we'll see animals start to pant. They'll be open mouth breathing. And it's actually evaporative cooling instead of sweating. It's through tiny respiratory droplets that are leaving the airway.
And even feeding at the wrong time can actually increase their heat load.
That's a great point. So not only environmental temperature do we have to deal with, but also it's the heat of digestion. Okay, when we feed cattle, we're actually feeding them rumen microbes, and they cause a fermentation process. That entire process of digestion creates heat all the way through. So we call it the heat of digestion. So cattle will actually accumulate heat during critical times of the day, depending on when we feed them. Okay, so the peak heat thermal period after we feed animals is about 4 to 6 hours after the feeding time. Okay, so it's good to understand that, because that can change some of our management strategies of how we feed cattle, on trying to balance that we're not maximizing the heat of the day along with the heat of digestion. If we feed them later in the evening, we can actually have some of that peak heat of digestion in the middle of the night when it's nice and cool. So we're not compounding some of these factors.
When we come back, I'll have more with AJ with some of the best management practices when it comes to managing heat stress in your herd.
I'm Bob Swartz, and I've devoted the last 43 years to helping Kansans reach their retirement goals and to protect the family farm. At Bob Swartz Financial, we believe everyone should be able to live the retirement they've always dreamed of. Our team of professionals can help you create an efficient strategy using a variety of investment vehicles to help you address your financial needs and your concerns. Bob Swartz Financial values commitment and transparency.
Highways 40, 83, and I-70 come together right here in Oakley. Roads that lead to businesses, to magnificent rock formations, to scenic vistas, to places where legends were made. Roads that lead us home. Discover Oakley, the gateway to western Kansas.
Okay, looks like it's time for our tour. Welcome to the Fort Wallace Museum. Here at the museum, you're going to find some really interesting stuff, like our replica stagecoach from the Butterfield Overland Dispatch. We've got facades from the fort buildings. We've got an 1870s flag. There's a plesiosaur that was discovered locally. We've got the Ray pump organ collection. We're a little bitty place with a great big story, and we'd love to have you.
This segment brought to you by Santa Fe Trail Meats in Overbrook. Let us help feed your family.
Welcome back to Ag Etc. I'm back with K-State veterinarian AJ Tarpoff with some of the best management practices when it comes to heat stress you can implement on your operation.
What are some of the best management practices for helping reduce stress in cows? Heat stress?
So that's a great question, and it comes down, I think we should start with what we can control the most easy, okay? And that's us, that's management, right? So when do we feed, when do we handle animals, okay? Cattle generally will start accumulating heat about mid-morning throughout the entire day into the early evening hours. Understanding that is, if we have to work cattle, if we have to move cattle, we need to try to do that during the cooler periods of the day, early in the morning, and try to have any processing, cattle handling, or shipping done before about 10 a.m. Okay, so that's where we start. I mentioned changing some of our feeding times. A lot of folks will recommend, and producers will try to target providing about 70% of the feed delivered to those animals in any given day as late in the evening as possible. Okay, and that way we get the heat of digestion in the middle of the night. Some other management strategies that we can implement are some of the basics. Okay, pen design. If we're talking about feedlot cattle, if we can have a nice earthen mound in the middle of the pen, that allows animals to catch some breezes that may be a little higher elevated than the regular pen surface. Okay, so a nice mound so they can catch the nice breeze that's coming through. Other general cleanliness issues. If we can make sure that we don't have anything occluding wind, and even a small breeze can literally be a lifesaver for some of our cattle in these situations. So making sure that we don't have excess weeds on the perimeter of an operation, make sure that we don't have stacks of hay that may be impeding some of that breeze. That if we can have those, just the general cleanliness to really get some good airflow, that can go a long way. On top of that, there are some other things that producers around not only Kansas, but the nation have implemented to help combat some of these heat stress issues. And that would be utilization of things like sunshades. Okay, sunshades are an investment in any given operation. One thing that I do want to point out with sunshades is we need to make sure that we have plenty of it. Okay, so unfortunately, if we don't have enough, cattle will group up and they'll bunch underneath some of these shades, and that actually is detrimental to them. But they will seek out the shade regardless. So we want between 20 and 40 square feet of shade access for each animal within the pen. So that's a good frame of mind. Other things are sprinklers. Okay, so sprinkler systems, they're a phenomenal tool, used very heavily in dairy operations, but in feedlots, it's a little bit different. Since these are outdoor environments, we have to be careful how we use these sprinkler systems to get the maximum effect from them. The idea behind sprinklers is, one, to control dust, two, to be able to cool the cattle in the pen floor during the nighttime cooling hours. We really don't want to use these sprinklers during the heat of the day or water too much, or we might actually increase the humidity at the pen level, which could be a detriment to the animals. So we want a big diameter water droplet. So we want big water droplets when we sprinkle, and we want to do that either during the overnight hours or the very early hours of the morning to make sure that we're cooling the pen surface and cooling the animals off before the day begins. Along with the pen surface itself, there's been a few test trials to actually look at pen surface itself. When we have dirt floored lots, that accumulates an enormous amount of heat.
Yeah.
And if anybody has walked through a farmyard or a barnyard, you can almost feel the heat through your boots. It really starts to accumulate heat. So if bare dirt or packed manure will both be about 25 degrees warmer in the heat of the day than something with bedding. Okay, so either wheat or straw, some type of straw bedding, or even baled corn stalks, something along those lines that we may or may not use for feed, but we can use for bedding. So having some nice spread out areas that will reduce the absorption of the heat on the pen surface itself, that can be another management strategy.
Absolutely. And to wrap up, there are a few resources available to producers when beginning that discussion of heat stress management.
There are. So how do we track this? How do we know when we need to implement some of these strategies? There's some very nice forecasting tools that are available to us. The first of which that gives a 7-day forecast of heat stress events that actually looks at temperature, humidity, wind speed, and solar radiation. All of these go into these calculations. One is from US Mark, the U.S. Meat Animal Research Center at Clay Center, Nebraska, has a 7-day forecast for all the different regions of the United States. That's a great thing to look forward the next couple days on when these events are going to happen. The next one that I really like that is a tremendous value to our producers all around Kansas is called the Kansas Mesonet system. And the Kansas Mesonet actually has an animal comfort index that takes into account those same factors that we just discussed that goes into the forecast, but it gives us real-time, up-to-date information on regional stations all over the state of Kansas. And another really neat piece of this tool, the Kansas Mesonet, is that it has a 7-day comfort outlook, a previous 7 days. So with that, I can actually measure nighttime cooling hours. We need cattle to have 6 hours of nighttime cooling. We can use that tool to be able to measure that.
And these tools are super user friendly.
Very, very easy. They're free. They're readily available online. That quick searches for US Mark heat stress and Kansas Mesonet, both of those are very valuable tools.
Well, AJ, thank you so much for being on the program. We truly appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'm Britton Rucker, and this has been Ag AM in Kansas.
The Kansas Wheat Innovation Center in Manhattan is rediscovering ways to get improved varieties and new genetics in the hands of farmers faster. Grower-led and checkoff-funded research initiatives are bringing about positive change. This grassroots leadership provides a strong voice in Topeka and Washington, D.C. Now is the time to partner with Kansas Wheat in moving wheat forward. Kansas Wheat Commission and Kansas Association of Wheat Growers, farmers investing in their future and yours. Log on to rediscoverwheat.org.
Sure Crop Fertilizers was started by my father, Don Sherman, and my mother, Shirley Sherman. Family business that started in the 80s. We predominantly focus on plant nutrients and what we can do to give growers better responses with the fertilizer dollars that they do, and what we can do to make those things work better for the grower. based out of Seneca, Kansas. We work with growers in their soil analysis to figure out what they need, and then we can put those in a blend that gives them the best results, and so that we can deliver that direct to their farm so that they have those nutrients where they need them, when they need them, and so that they can apply them in a manner that's very efficient to them and works well on their planting systems and what they're doing. Sure Crop Fertilizers has been around for a long time. We always say we're big enough to take care of everything you need, but we're small enough to do it quickly. You can get a hold of us at 1-800-635-4743. Our website is surecropfertilizers.com, and you can always email me at Corey@surecropfertilizers.com, and with any questions you have, and we're glad to answer it and work with you.
This segment brought to you by Farm Credit Associations of Kansas, lending support to rural America, and by American Ag Service, your DuPont Pioneer dealer.
Welcome back to Ag AM Kansas. I'm Brittany Rucker, and today for our Young Leaders in Ag segment, I have with me now Payke Brown. Welcome, Payke.
Nice to be here.
So, Payke, give me a little bit about your ag background.
All right, so my family owns and operates RBRB LLC, which is a Western store in Northeast Topeka. Mm-hmm. So my ag background would have been growing up here. We raised horses and cattle. Actually never was raised hogs. That will be where most of my background is, but started showing in 4-H as soon as I could. Showed hogs when I was 2 years old, and kind of that's where my ag background's been.
Yeah, and then you eventually went on to go to a JUCO and then K-State. Yes,
so I graduated from Jefferson West High School here in Meriden, Kansas. From there, I went and judged livestock at Fort Scott Community College for a year. After concluding a year there, I transferred to Kansas State University.
Yeah, and then you were also on the Junior Swine Association, their board.
Yes, so starting my junior board career, there's this show series here in Kansas called the Eastern Kansas Swine Show Series. There I started my junior board stuff as I served 2 years on their junior board. At the conclusion of that, I applied for the National Junior Swine Association's Junior Board of Directors. Mm-hmm. I got on there in 2018 and served until this last July of 2020.
So tell me a little bit about that. Had COVID affected you in that position?
Very much so. When we were doing with all these shows, obviously we have 2 large shows in the summer, and with roughly 2,000 kids coming to those events. So with COVID, it's really affected how we produce those shows, especially with the cancellation of one in June. Mm-hmm. We had a coalition there with it's called the Team Purebred, another junior association. With that, we combined and made a show on the 1st of July, mm-hmm. And we were able to go off without a hitch, had about 3,500 entries, and were able to complete that.
That's awesome. So, Payke, final question, and probably loaded question. Where do you see yourself in the future in the ag industry? In the ag industry in the future, probably my biggest hope or dream is to continue and raise livestock. I have a passion for raising good livestock and helping younger individuals, and I hope I can stay within that segment, whether it be working with feed companies or something like that. As long as kids and pigs are involved, that'll be perfect with me. Do you have any aspirations to continue this retail?
Oh yeah, like I told Mom and Dad, I plan on never letting this go. Yeah. Whatever it takes to keep in the family is kind of where I want it to stay. It's been a family business for 22 years, and I don't plan on letting it change anytime soon.
Absolutely. Well, Payke, thank you so much for being on the program. And this has been your Young Leaders in Ag segment here on Ag AM in Kansas.
At Farm Credit, we partner with America's farmers who work hard each and every day to grow the food that we all enjoy. It's not an easy task, but it's an important one. Farm Credit is proud to work with farmers and ranchers, lending support in rural America.
Welcome to the Western Kansas Wildlife Travel Center, right here in my hometown of Oakley, Kansas. We're the front door of Western Kansas, located on 3 main highways, I-70, US 83, and US 40. And all those roads lead to history, beautiful scenery, and adventure, no matter which direction you go. We now have an IHOP. That brand that you've trusted up and down the road in all your travels is staffed with local folks, real people, just like you and me, and we're waiting on you to join us. So for fun, adventure, fuel up, fuel your body, and let's have some fun.
ValleyVet.com is your one-stop shop for your every animal need. From prescription meds, vaccines, equipment, and more for the ranch to the show ring. Shop ValleyVet.com for fast shipping and great prices.
Valley Vet Supply.
This segment brought to you by Sure Crop. Liquid crop nutrition delivered right to your farm.
Welcome back to Ag AM in Kansas. I'm Britton Rucker. The Kansas Department of Agriculture has now identified positive cases of vesicular stomatitis virus, also known as VSV, in 20 counties in Kansas. KDA's Division of Animal Health continues to respond to the outbreak that began in south central Kansas in mid-June and now has expanded to reach to the north and east. Speaking with me now, more on this is Assistant Animal Health Commissioner for the Kansas Department of Agriculture, Andy Hawkins. Welcome, Andy.
Hey, good morning.
So, Andy, for people who are completely unfamiliar with this virus, give us a bit of background on it.
All right, well, thanks, Britton, for the invitation today. All right, so this is a viral disease. It primarily affects horses, but it can also affect cattle, sheep, goats, alpacas, and llamas. The vast majority of all cases we've seen so far have been in horses. We've had a few cases in cattle confirmed. It's a disease that is a very high morbidity, but a very low mortality. So it's a disease that is very manageable, but it does have to run its course if it gets in the livestock population.
So what are some symptoms for VSV?
All right, so the symptoms that we would see with vesicular stomatitis is the owner may notice their animals reluctant to eat, excessive drooling. Those are things that we would see even up to lameness. And then from there, just the classical lesions that we see typical with VSV. And those are, by definition, vesicular stomatitis, vesicles, and sore mouth. So a lot, in reality, we don't really see many vesicles because that's in the very acute phase of the disease. So what we really see is crusty lesions or loss of epithelium. So we'll see, especially on some of these horses that are super sore, they'll lose the top layer of their tongue, kind of the epithelium from their tongue. They also have some ulcerations around their mouth, ulcerations in their nose, and then we can also see that in their ears, ventral midline, and then some coronary band lesions as well. And these symptoms that we've seen throughout this year of the cases we've investigated, they're asymmetrical, they're a lot of times unilateral, so it's something that's definitely out of the ordinary. So anything like that you see, you definitely need to work with your veterinarian and have it looked at. One of the things that owners might notice first is their horses or even their cattle or just their livestock in general is reluctance to eat. So they might not want to eat. They might see some excessive salivation or drooling, and maybe even occasionally see some lameness associated with it as well.
When we come back, Andy talks to me about really how widespread this virus is in Kansas. It's coming up, don't miss it.
Kansas Corn reminds you that E15 fuel is the right choice for every kind of driver. For the car enthusiast, E15 has higher octane. For the thrifty driver, E15 is priced lower than regular unleaded. For the nature lover, E15 provides cleaner air. For the shopper who buys local, E15 has more ethanol from our Kansas corn farms. Choose E15 for a higher octane, lower price, cleaner American fuel. Message from the Kansas Corn Commission. Learn more at kscorn.com.
No one plans to get sick or injured. But when life happens, it's important you and your family are protected. Kansas Farm Bureau health plans are there to provide continued health care coverage to meet your needs. Choose from a broad range of individual and family plans. And if you're over 65, we have options for you too. Learn more at kfbhealthplans.com or contact a Farm Bureau Financial Services agent near you.
This segment brought to you by Kansas Farm Bureau, the voice of agriculture. To join today or for more information, go to kfb.org or find us on Facebook and Twitter.
Welcome back to Ag Etc. I return with the Assistant Animal Health Commissioner for the Kansas Department of Agriculture, Andy Hawkins, over stomatitis virus in Kansas.
So Andy, I kind of touched on this earlier, but really how widespread is this outbreak?
Well, as you mentioned, the index case for this year was confirmed on June 16th in southwest Kansas in Butler County. Since that time, it has continued to expand in that region. It's also moved east and also north. And we've seen cases now in the Missouri, Arkansas, and Oklahoma as well. It's interesting that the vast majority of these cases have been associated with a close proximity to a river. So that's something that we've kind of taken note of. There's a lot about this virus that we do not know, but we do know that one of the vectors for this disease, being the black fly, does lay larvae which float down the river until they hatch, and those are infected, and then they come and bite horses or susceptible animals.
Right, and those that are infected go into a quarantine process.
That's right. So they go into a quarantine process, and that quarantine process, so first off, it's important to know that vesicular stomatitis actually is a reportable disease in Kansas. So it's something that we do have to know about. So it's something that you would work with your local veterinarian, and then they would notify the Kansas Department of Ag. We would respond to that case, and then there's a couple different ways that we may respond. So if it's in a county that's already been confirmed positive, we have the ability to manage that as a suspect positive. If it's a county that is a new county to us, we will come and test for sure. So once that we either have a suspect positive or a confirmed positive, we will then put that county, or that premise rather, under official quarantine, and that quarantine lasts for 14 days from the date that the last affected animal on the site develops lesions. So if we put a quarantine in place on day 1, and then on day 2 you have an extra horse or a horse on that premise develop lesions, then that quarantine is restarted on day 2.
So how can individuals help slow the spread of VSV?
Well, part of our job and our mission is to educate people, and this is something that we've done a lot of outreach to local practitioners in the equine community, as well as the agriculture community in general. One of the things to remember is, how is this actually spread? So obviously we touched a little bit on the vectors. So flies are obviously a concern, so we want to do what we can for fly control. And then from there, also just realizing good biosecurity practices. And those are things that we should do anyways, because any horse with active lesions, potentially the VS could spread by direct contact with that lesion. So we would want to minimize sharing of equipment, sharing of tack. If we did have a horse that was positive on a premise, we would recommend that that horse would be isolated to a location on that premise away from the other horses, just to avoid that direct contact. Those are good biosecurity practices that we probably should be thinking and considering anyways.
And once again, if you have any of these symptoms, your local vet is your best bet on this.
Absolutely. We work very closely with our local practitioners, and we've got a great relationship with them, and that's who we encourage you to reach out to. We've got some updated documents that we update daily on our website, www.agriculture.ks.gov/VSV.
Awesome. Well, Andy, thank you so much for being on the program. We truly appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching Ag Etc. As always, I'm Britton Rucker, and I'll see you here next week here on Ag AM in Kansas.
Watch Ag AM in Kansas online at agaminkansas.com.